Never dig in the garden, Sarah, promise me. Those words followed me for 20 years of marriage. Every spring when I wanted to plant roses, every fall when I dreamed of tulip bulbs, my husband David would get that strange look in his eyes, the one that made me stop asking questions. Now David was gone. Heart attack at no warning. 1 minute he was drinking his morning coffee. The next minute paramedics were telling me there was nothing they could do. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. It's amazing to see how far these stories go. And please subscribe. It really helps me share more of them with you. I stood at our kitchen window, staring at the backyard that had been off limits for 2 decades. The grass grew wild and uneven. Weeds poked through everywhere. It looked terrible compared to our neighbors' perfect gardens. But David had been so firm about it, so scared when I even mentioned digging. The funeral was yesterday. Today, I was alone in our house for the first time ever. My sister Lisa knocked on the door around noon. She had been staying with me since David died, but today she looked different. Nervous, Sarah. We need to talk, she said, sitting at the kitchen table. About what? About David. About things he told me that he made me promise never to tell you. My hands went cold. What things? Lisa pulled out an envelope from her purse. My name was written on it in David's handwriting. He gave me this 6 months ago. Said, if anything happened to him, I should give it to you after the funeral. I stared at the envelope. 6 months ago, David had been planning for his death. Lisa, what's going on? Just read it, Sarah, then we'll talk. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter in David's neat writing. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and it's time for the truth. I know you always wondered about the garden. There's something buried there that I've been protecting you from for 20 years. Something that could destroy our life together if the wrong people found out about it. But now I'm gone. And you need to know. Look under the old oak tree, 3 feet down. Use the metal detector in the garage. It's hidden behind the paint cans. I bought it years ago but never told you why. I love you. I'm sorry for all the secrets. David, the letter fell from my hands. Lisa was watching me carefully. You knew about this? I asked. Not everything. David came to me 6 months ago. Said he was having chest pains and was worried about his heart. He made me promise to give you this letter if something happened to him. I looked out the window again. The old oak tree stood in the center of our wild backyard. For 20 years, I had admired that tree. David always said it was the reason he bought this house. Now I knew there was more to the story. I'm going to dig, I said. Sarah, maybe you should think about this. What if it's something bad? What if you don't want to know? But I was already walking toward the garage. Behind the paint cans, exactly where David said it would be, was a metal detector still in its box. The price tag showed he bought it 15 years ago. I found a shovel and walked to the backyard. The metal detector was simple to use. I turned it on and walked slowly around the oak tree. After 5 minutes, it started beeping loudly near the south side of the tree. I started digging, 3 feet down. Just like David said, I hit something hard, not a box, something bigger. It was a car trunk. My heart pounded as I cleared the dirt away. The metal was rusty but still solid. There was no lock, just a simple latch that opened with a loud click. Inside was a plastic bag wrapped around something rectangular. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Money. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills. More money than I had ever seen in my life. But there was something else at the bottom of the trunk. A brown envelope marked for SARAH, read first. I sat in the dirt next to the hole and opened the envelope with dirty fingers. Sarah, the money is real. Roughly $2 million. It's been buried here since before we got married. I know you have questions, and I know this looks bad, but please read everything before you decide what to think of me. When I was 25, 5 years before I met you, I was a different person. I fell in with some bad people who were planning to rob a bank. I was young and stupid and thought it would be easy money. The robbery went wrong. Someone got hurt. We got away with the money, but I knew it was blood money. My partners wanted to spend it right away, but I couldn't do it. I told them I had hidden it somewhere safe, and we should wait until things cooled down. Then I took my share and ran. I changed my name from David Mills to David Cooper and moved to this town. That's when I met you. I've been David Cooper for so long that David Mills feels like a different person. But the FBI never stopped looking for that money. Every few years, an agent would come around asking questions. I lived in fear that they would find us, find you. That's why I could never let you dig in the garden. I know this changes everything. I know you might hate me for lying to you for 20 years, but I need you to know that meeting you saved my life. Loving you made me want to be a better person. Every day with you was a gift I didn't deserve. The money is yours now. You can turn it in to the FBI if that's what your heart tells you to do, or you can keep it and start a new life somewhere far from here. But whatever you choose, know that I love you, and I'm sorry for all the secrets. David P.S. There's one more thing buried in the backyard, under the rose bush by the fence. If you decide to keep the money, you'll need what's buried there too. I read the letter 3 times before it really sank in. My husband of 20 years was a bank robber. The man who wouldn't even speed in his car. The man who paid his taxes early every year. The man who donated to charity every Christmas. A bank robber. I heard footsteps behind me. Lisa was walking across the yard. Oh my God, Sarah. Is that what I think it is? I showed her the letter. Her eyes got wider and wider as she read. Sarah, this is crazy. David was the most honest person I knew. Apparently not. Lisa looked at all the money scattered around the hole. What are you going to do? I don't know. But first, I need to see what's under the rose bush. The rose bush was old and had never bloomed well. Now I knew why David had never let me replace it. I used the metal detector again, and sure enough, it beeped near the roots. This time, I found a waterproof box about the size of a shoebox. Inside were documents, a birth certificate for David Mills, a driver's license with David's picture but a different name, newspaper clippings about a bank robbery in Chicago 25 years ago, and photos. Photos of David when he was young, with different hair and different clothes, standing next to people I didn't recognize. One of the photos showed him holding a gun. My David, holding a gun. At the bottom of the box was another envelope, this one marked, final letter. Sarah, if you found this box, then you're really considering keeping the money. I understand if you can't. I understand if you hate me, but there are things you need to know if you're going to disappear. First, the FBI file on the bank robbery. They have photos of David Mills, but I look very different now. 20 years of marriage and good living changed me. They're not actively looking anymore, but if someone turned in the money, they would investigate. Second, my real name isn't David Mills either. It's Michael Harrison. David Mills was a fake ID I bought when I first ran. Michael Harrison is buried even deeper. But that's who I really was before everything went wrong. Third, there are 2 more people who know about this money. Tommy Ritchie and Frank Santos. They were my partners in the robbery. Tommy got caught 6 months after we split up and went to prison. He got out 3 years ago. Frank disappeared completely. But the FBI thinks he's living somewhere in Florida. If Tommy or Frank ever found me, they would want their share of the money. That's another reason I could never let you dig, not just because of the FBI, but because of them. The documents in this box will help you create a new identity if you need to. I learned a lot about hiding during my first year on the run. Use that knowledge if you choose to keep the money. But Sarah, please be careful. This money has been nothing but trouble from the beginning. It cost me 25 years of looking over my shoulder. It cost me the ability to be completely honest with the woman I loved most in the world. Maybe it's time to let someone else deal with it. I love you forever. Michael David. I sat in my backyard surrounded by $2 million in cash and 25 years worth of lies. My husband wasn't who I thought he was. Our entire marriage was built on a secret that could have destroyed us at any moment. But then I thought about that David I knew, the man who made me coffee every morning, the man who held me when I cried about my mother's cancer, the man who worked 2 jobs to pay for my college degree, the man who adopted 3 stray cats because he couldn't say no to animals in need. That man was real, even if his name wasn't. Lisa was still standing there, looking shocked. Sarah, you have to call the FBI. This money doesn't belong to you. I know what I should do, I said, but I keep thinking about something. What? David said someone got hurt in the robbery, but he didn't say killed. What if it wasn't as bad as it sounds? What if this money could do good now, instead of just sitting in some FBI warehouse? Lisa shook her head. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. This is blood money. She was right. But I couldn't stop thinking about all the good things I could do with $2 million. My mother needed surgery she couldn't afford. My brother was about to lose his house. There were scholarships I could create, charities I could help. Was it wrong to keep money from a 25-year-old crime if I used it to help people? I was still thinking about it when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the fence, I could see a black sedan. 2 people in suits got out and walked toward my front door. My blood went cold. "Lisa," I whispered, "help me put this money back in the trunk now." We worked fast, stuffing bills back into the plastic bag and shoving it into the buried trunk. I threw dirt over it as quickly as I could while Lisa went to answer the door. I heard voices from inside the house, a man and a woman. They sounded official. I was still brushing dirt off my clothes when Lisa came to the back door. "Sarah, there are 2 FBI agents here to see you. They say it's about David." My heart hammered as I walked into the house. The agents were sitting in my living room. The woman was older with gray hair. The man was younger and looked serious. "Mrs. Cooper," the woman said, "I'm Agent Martinez, and this is Agent Thompson. We're sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I managed to say. "How can I help you?" "We understand your husband passed away recently. We're here because his death might be connected to an old case we've been working on." Agent Thompson opened a folder. Inside were photos of David from 25 years ago. "David Mills, my husband when he was young. Do you recognize this man, Mrs. Cooper?" I looked at the photos. They clearly showed David, but he looked so different, younger, thinner, with shorter hair. If I hadn't just spent the morning learning about his secrets, I might not have recognized him. "He looks familiar," I said carefully, "but I can't place him." The agents exchanged a glance. "Mrs. Cooper, we have reason to believe your husband might have been connected to a bank robbery in Chicago 25 years ago. 3 men robbed First National Bank and got away with $2.3 million. 1 security guard was shot and permanently disabled. We caught one of the robbers, but the other 2 disappeared along with most of the money." Agent Martinez leaned forward. "We've been tracking David Mills for decades. We lost his trail about 20 years ago, right around the time your husband moved to this town and married you." "I don't understand what you're suggesting." "We're suggesting that David Cooper and David Mills might have been the same person." The room was quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Lisa was standing in the doorway, looking pale. "That's impossible," I said. "I knew my husband for 20 years. He was an accountant. He paid his taxes. He coached Little League baseball." Agent Thompson nodded. "People change, Mrs. Cooper. Sometimes criminals try to start over and become good citizens. We're not here to judge your husband or your marriage. We're here because we think he might have information about where the missing money is hidden." "What kind of information? Did your husband ever mention anything unusual about your property? Any reason why certain areas might be special or off?" My mouth went dry. "No, nothing like that." Agent Martinez stood up. "Mrs. Cooper, would you mind if we looked around your property? Sometimes people hide things without their families knowing about it." "Do you have a warrant?" "No, but we could get one if necessary. It would be easier if you gave us permission." I thought about the trunk buried under the oak tree. If they brought metal detectors or ground-penetrating radar, they would find it in minutes. "I don't think that's appropriate right now," I said. "My husband just died. I'm still grieving." The agents looked at each other again. "Of course," Agent Martinez said. "We understand. But Mrs. Cooper, if you find anything unusual while going through your husband's belongings, please call us immediately." She handed me a business card. "And Mrs. Cooper, if your husband was David Mills, and if he did hide money on your property, that money doesn't legally belong to you. It belongs to the bank and the insurance company. Keeping it would be a federal crime." After the agents left, I sat in my kitchen with Lisa. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Lisa said, "Sarah, this is serious. They know who David was. They're going to get a warrant and search your property. I know, you have to turn in the money. There's no choice now." But even as she said it, I was thinking about something else. The agents said they lost David Mills' trail 20 years ago. That meant they had been looking for him all this time. They must have suspected that David Cooper was really David Mills, but they never had proof. Until now. David's death had somehow brought them here. But how? I thought about the past week, the funeral, the obituary in the newspaper, all the people who had come to pay their respects. Then I remembered something that made my blood run cold at the funeral. There had been a man I didn't recognize, older, with a scar on his left cheek. He had come up to me during the viewing and said he was an old friend of David's from before we were married. He said his name was Tommy Ritchie, one of David's partners from the bank robbery. Tommy had been at David's funeral. He had seen the obituary. He had seen where we lived on. If the FBI was here asking questions, maybe Tommy had already talked to them. Maybe he had made some kind of deal. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me think the FBI was coming back with a warrant. Every car that drove down our street made me think it was Tommy Ritchie coming to claim his share of the money. I kept thinking about David's letter. He said Tommy got out of prison 3 years ago. He also said that if Tommy ever found him, he would want his share of the money. But Tommy had found him. At the funeral. The next morning, I made a decision. I called in sick to my job at the library and sent Lisa home. I told her I needed time alone to grieve. She didn't want to leave, but I insisted. As soon as she was gone, I went to the backyard with the shovel. I was going to move the money. If the FBI came back with a warrant, they would find nothing under the oak tree. I would hide the money somewhere else until I could figure out what to do with it. But when I got to the oak tree, I could see that someone had been digging. The dirt I had carefully replaced yesterday was disturbed. There were footprints in the mud around the tree. I dug frantically, praying I was wrong. The trunk was gone. Someone had taken the $2 million. I stood in the hole, breathing hard and trying not to panic. Who knew about the money? David's letter said only Tommy and Frank knew about it. But Frank was supposedly in Florida. That left Tommy. Tommy had been at the funeral. He had talked to me. He had probably driven by the house and seen me digging yesterday. Maybe he had even watched me bury the money again. And last night, while I was inside worrying about the FBI, Tommy had come back and taken what he thought was his. I was still standing in the empty hole when my phone rang. Sarah. The voice was rough, like someone who had smoked too many cigarettes. Who is this? This is Tom. We met at David's funeral. I think you know why I'm calling. My hands started shaking. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do, honey. I know you found David's little treasure, and I know you figured out who I am. I don't have any treasure. Tommy laughed. Sarah, I watched you dig it up yesterday. Nice oak tree. David always did like trees. So he had been watching. What do you want? What's mine? David, Frank and I split that money 3 ways 25 years ago. David ran off with all of it. But now I'm here to collect. The money's gone, I said. The FBI came yesterday. They took everything. Another laugh. Nice try, but the FBI didn't take anything. I know because I took it myself last night while you were sleeping. My heart sank. So you have it? I have some of it. Turns out, David was holding out on us. He only buried about $2 million, but we stole $2.3 million from that bank. Where's the other $300,000? Sarah, I didn't know what to say. David's letters hadn't mentioned any missing money. I don't know about any other money. Well, you better find it, because if you don't, I'm going to have to tell the FBI exactly where David Cooper buried the money from the First National Bank robbery, and then you'll go to jail for hiding stolen goods. The line went dead. I stood in my backyard, holding my phone and trying to think. Tommy had the $2 million from under the tree, but he was threatening me about another $300,000 that I had never heard of. Where would David hide more money? I thought about his letter again. He said to look under the rosebush if I decided to keep the money. I had found documents there, not money, but maybe I had missed something. I went back to the rosebush and dug deeper. 5 feet down, I found another waterproof container. This one was smaller, about the size of a briefcase. Inside were more documents, but also something else. A key. The key was attached to a tag with an address I recognized. It was a storage facility about 10 miles outside of town. David had rented a storage unit. I drove to the storage facility that afternoon. The key opened Unit 47. Inside was a single filing cabinet and a small safe. The filing cabinet was full of papers, bank statements for accounts I had never heard of, investment records, real estate documents. Over the past 20 years, David had been slowly and carefully investing the missing $300,000. He had bought stocks, bonds, and even a small rental property in the next state over, all under different names. All completely legal once the money entered the banking system. The $300,000 had grown to almost $1 million. In the safe was a final letter. Sarah, if you found this storage unit, then you understand that I didn't just bury the money and forget about it. I've spent 20 years trying to turn stolen money into clean money. Every investment I made, every stock I bought, was an attempt to wash away the crime. I wanted to give back to the bank what was stolen, but I couldn't do it without revealing who I was. So instead, I tried to make the money work for good. The rental property I bought, all the profits go to a scholarship fund for kids whose parents can't afford college. The stock investments, I planned to donate everything to charity when I died. You'll find all the paperwork in the filing cabinet, every transaction, every donation. every penny accounted for. I know this doesn't make up for what I did 25 years ago, but I tried to spend the rest of my life making amends. The choice is yours now. Sarah, you can follow through on my plan to donate everything. You can turn it all over to the FBI, or you can use it to start over somewhere new. But whatever you choose, know that I tried to make things right. I love you. David Dye sat in the storage unit reading about my husband's secret life as a financial philanthropist. For 20 years, while I thought he was just an accountant, he had been managing $1 million portfolio and donating hundreds of thousands to charity. My phone rang again. Tommy, find my money yet, Sarah? I found something, but it's not what you think. What's that supposed to mean? Meet me at the Denny's on Highway 12 in 1 hour. I'll show you what David really did with your money. Tommy was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back booth with a cup of coffee. He looked older than at the funeral, more tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of bad choices. I sat across from him and put David's financial records on the table. Your $300,000 is there, I said, but it's not cash anymore. Tommy flipped through the papers, frowning. What is this stuff? David invested your share of the money. It's grown to almost $1 million over 20 years, but it's all in legal investments now. Stocks, bonds, real estate, so cash it out. I can't. I'm not on any of the accounts. David set them up under fake names. The only way to access the money would be to prove I'm David's widow, which would require showing the FBI his real identity. Tommy's frown deepened. You're lying. Look at the documents. David kept records of everything. He was trying to make amends for what you three did. He donated hundreds of thousands to charity over the years. I don't care about charity. I care about my money. Your money is gone, Tommy. David turned it into something else, something clean. Tommy was quiet for a long time, studying the papers. Finally, he looked up at me. You know what your problem is, Sarah? You still think David was a good guy. You think because he donated some money and played house with you for 20 years, that makes up for what he did. David changed. People can change. David was a coward. When the robbery went bad and that guard got shot, David ran. He left Frank and me to deal with the consequences. Frank got so paranoid he disappeared completely. I got caught and spent 15 years in prison. But David got to play pretend with a nice lady in a nice house and act like none of it ever happened. I thought about the security guard who had been permanently disabled. David's letters had mentioned that someone got hurt, but he hadn't talked about the lasting damage. For 20 years, while David was building a new life with me, that guard was dealing with the consequences of their crime. What do you want me to do, Tommy? I can't change what happened 25 years ago. No, but you can make it right. How? Tommy leaned forward. The FBI is going to search your property. When they do, they're not going to find anything. But you could leave something for them to find, something that would lead them to all these investment accounts. You want me to turn in the money. I want you to do what David should have done 25 years ago. Take responsibility. I looked at the man across from me, a career criminal who had spent 15 years in prison, but somehow, he was making more sense than anyone else in this whole situation. What about the $2 million you took from my backyard? Tommy smiled for the first time since I had met him. What $2 million? I don't know anything about any money buried in your backyard, but you called me. You said you watched me dig it up. I called you about the $300,000 that David stole from Frank and me. I never said anything about any other money. I stared at him. But if you didn't take the money from under the oak tree, then who did? Maybe the FBI found it when they searched your property last night. They didn't search my property last night. Tommy's smile faded. Then maybe you have a bigger problem than you realized. I drove home with my mind spinning. If Tommy didn't take the money, and the FBI didn't take the money, then who did? Frank Santos, the third man from the robbery, the one who supposedly disappeared to Florida. But maybe Frank hadn't disappeared. Maybe he had been keeping track of David all these years, just like Tommy had. Maybe he had seen the obituary too. Maybe Frank had been watching my house yesterday, waiting for his chance. When I got home, I found my front door standing open. I called 911 and waited in my car until the police arrived. They searched the house carefully but found no one inside. However, they found signs that someone had been there. Drawers had been searched. Papers had been moved. Someone had gone through David's belongings methodically, looking for something specific. In our bedroom, they had torn apart the mattress and searched the closets. In the basement, They had moved boxes and opened every container. Someone had been looking for more money. The police took a report and left. They said it was probably just a routine burglary, but I knew better. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my living room with the lights on, watching the windows and listening for any sound. At 3 a.m., I heard a car door slam in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw a man walking toward my front door. Older, thin, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't trying to hide. He walked right up to my door and knocked. "Sarah Cooper," he called out. "My name is Frank Santos. I think we need to talk." I spoke through the closed door. "Go away or I'm calling the police." "The police can't help you with this, but I can. I don't have anything that belongs to you." "Yes, you do, and I know Tommy already came to see you about his share, but Tommy doesn't know the whole story. Neither do you." Against my better judgment, I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. Frank looked nothing like I had expected. He was thin and nervous, with kind eyes. He looked more like a librarian than a bank robber. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said. "I'm here to tell you the truth about what happened 25 years ago." "What truth?" "The truth about why David ran, the truth about why the FBI is looking for that money, and the truth about what's going to happen to you if you don't turn it in." I studied his face through the gap in the door. He didn't look dangerous, but neither had David. "5 minutes," I said, closing the door to remove the chain. "You can sit on the front porch and tell me whatever you came to say." We sat in my porch chairs like two normal people having a normal conversation. But nothing about this situation was normal. First thing you need to know, Frank said, is that David didn't plan the robbery. It was Tommy's idea. Tommy brought David and me in because he needed people he could trust. Why should I believe you? Because I'm the one who shot the security guard. I went cold. What? It was an accident. The guard tried to be a hero, went for his gun. I panicked and shot him. That's when everything went wrong. Tommy wanted to grab as much money as we could and run, but David wanted to help the guard. He was trying to stop the bleeding when the sirens started. Frank looked out at my dark yard. David saved that man's life. Sarah, if he hadn't administered first aid while Tommy and I were grabbing money, the guard would have died. But David still ran. We all ran. But David was different after that. He was traumatized by what happened. A few days later, he came to Tommy and me and said he was turning himself in. Said he couldn't live with what we had done. But he didn't turn himself in. No, because Tommy threatened him. Said if David went to the police, he would tell them that David was the one who shot the guard. Tommy figured the police would believe him over David since he already had a criminal record and David was clean. I thought about this. So David ran to protect himself from Tommy. David ran to protect you. What? Frank turned to look at me. David was already dating you when the robbery happened. He was planning to propose. Tommy knew that, and he used it against David. Said if David turned them in, he would make sure you got hurt. My heart stopped. Tommy threatened me 25 years ago. Tommy threatened to hurt you if David ever crossed him. That's why David changed his name and moved to this town. He was trying to keep you safe. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was changing again. David hadn't just been hiding from the FBI. He had been hiding from Tommy to protect me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Tommy is planning to double-cross you. He's not just here for the money. He's here for revenge. He spent 15 years in prison thinking about how David betrayed him. He blames David for everything that went wrong. But David didn't betray him. Tommy doesn't see it that way. Now that David is dead, Tommy is going to take his anger out on you. Frank stood up from his chair. Sarah, you need to turn in that money to the FBI. All of it. The $2 million from your backyard and the $1 million from the storage unit. I don't have the $2 million from the backyard. Someone stole it. Frank smiled sadly. No one stole it, Sarah. I moved it to keep it safe from Tommy. You have it. I have it. And I'm going to give it back to you so you can give it to the FBI. Why would you do that? Frank was quiet for a moment. Because 25 years ago, I shot an innocent man and ruined his life. I've been living with that guilt ever since. I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure that man's family gets the restitution they deserve. He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. That's the FBI agent who's been working this case for 15 years, Agent Rodriguez. She's a good person. If you call her and tell her you want to turn in the money, she'll protect you from Tommy. How do you know? Because I already called her. I've been cooperating with the FBI for the past 3 years, since I decided I couldn't live with this secret anymore. They know I'm here, and they know why. You're working with the FBI. I'm trying to make amends, just like David was. Frank walked toward his car, then turned back to me. Sarah, your husband was a good man who made one terrible mistake when he was young. Don't let that mistake destroy the rest of your life. Call Agent Rodriguez in the morning. Tell her everything. She'll help you sort this out. After Frank left, I sat on my porch until the sun came up, thinking about everything I had learned. David wasn't the criminal I thought he was. He was a victim of Tommy's manipulation, who had spent 20 years trying to make amends while protecting me from danger I didn't even know existed. The money wasn't just stolen cash. It was evidence of a crime that had ruined multiple lives, including the security guard who was still dealing with his injuries 25 years later. And I wasn't just a widow trying to decide what to do with an unexpected inheritance. I was the key to finally bringing justice to a case that had been unsolved for decades. At 9 a.m. I called Agent Rodriguez. Agent Rodriguez, this is Sarah Cooper. I think you know why I'm calling, Mrs. Cooper. Yes, Frank Santos said you might call. Are you ready to tell me about your husband's connection to the First National Bank robbery? I'm ready to tell you everything. 2 hours later, Agent Rodriguez was sitting in my living room while I showed her David's letters and the documents from the storage unit. Frank was there too, having agreed to serve as a witness. Double quotes, Mrs. Cooper, Agent Rodriguez said, after reviewing everything, I want you to know that you're not in any legal trouble. You didn't know about your husband's past, and you've been cooperative since learning about it. What happens now? We'll need you to sign some paperwork, turning over the money to the FBI, all of it, including the investment accounts. The insurance company will distribute restitution to the victims, starting with the security guard and his family. And Tommy. Agent Rodriguez and Frank exchanged glances. Tommy Ritchie is already under surveillance, Agent Rodriguez said. We've been watching him since he got out of prison 3 years ago. When he contacted you yesterday, he violated his parole by engaging in criminal activity. He'll be going back to prison. For how long? Long enough that you won't have to worry about him anymore. Frank leaned forward. Sarah, there's something else you should know. The security guard from the robbery. His name is Robert Chen. He's 58 now, and he's been living on disability payments his whole life because of what I did to him. Agent Rodriguez nodded. Mr. Chen and his family will receive the largest portion of the restitution. It won't undo what happened to him, but it will ensure he and his wife can live comfortably for the rest of their lives. I thought about Robert Chen, a man I had never met but whose life had been changed forever by the choices my husband made when he was young. I want to meet him, I said suddenly. Mr. Chen, I want to apologize for what David did. Agent Rodriguez looked surprised. Mrs. Cooper, you don't need to do that. You weren't involved in the crime, but I benefited from it. For 20 years, I lived in a house and had a life that was paid for, in part, with money stolen from his bank. I want him to know how sorry I am. 3 weeks later, I drove to a small town about 2 hours away where Robert Chen lived with his wife Linda. Agent Rodriguez had arranged the meeting after Mr. Chen agreed to see me. I was nervous as I knocked on their door. What do you say to someone whose life was ruined by your husband's crime? Robert Chen answered the door himself. He was a small man with kind eyes, walking with a cane. His left arm hung at an odd angle, obviously still affected by the shooting 25 years ago. Mrs. Cooper, he said with a slight smile. Please come in. Linda Chen served tea while we sat in their modest living room. The house was small but comfortable, filled with photographs of children and grandchildren. I don't know what to say, I began. I'm sorry doesn't seem like enough. Robert set down his teacup. Mrs. Cooper, Agent Rodriguez told me about your husband's letters, about how he tried to make amends over the years, but it doesn't change what happened to you. No, it doesn't, but it tells me something important about the kind of man your husband became. Linda spoke up. We've been angry for 25 years, angry at the men who robbed the bank, angry at the system that let them get away, angry at God for letting it happen to us. You have every right to be angry. Robert shook his head. Anger has been eating us alive, Mrs. Cooper. When Agent Rodriguez told us about the restitution money, I wasn't happy. I was bitter. I thought, why now? Why, after all these years? But then she showed us your husband's investment records. Linda continued, all those donations he made to charity, all those scholarships for kids who needed help. He was trying to do good with the money. It doesn't excuse what he did, No, Robert agreed. But it shows me that people can change. That even someone who makes a terrible mistake when they're young can spend the rest of their life trying to make up for it. I started crying then, thinking about David and all the secrets he had carried to protect me and to try to make amends for his past. Mrs. Cooper, Robert said gently, your husband paid for his crime in his own way. He lived 25 years, looking over his shoulder, afraid that his past would catch up with him and hurt you. That's a kind of prison too. But you've been in a different kind of prison because of what he did. Yes, but now we're both free. The money will help Linda and me in our retirement. And knowing that your husband tried to do right by his victims, that helps heal some of the anger we've been carrying. We talked for 2 more hours. Robert and Linda told me about their life together, how they had struggled financially because of his disability, but how they had found happiness despite everything. They showed me pictures of their 3 children and 7 grandchildren. When I got ready to leave, Linda hugged me. Thank you for coming, she said. It means a lot that you cared enough to face us. Thank you for forgiving him, I replied. And me. Robert walked me to my car despite his cane. Mrs. Cooper, can I give you some advice? Of course, don't let your husband's past define the rest of your life. He made one bad choice when he was young, but he spent 20 years making good choices with you. Focus on the good choices. I drove home thinking about Robert Chen's words. David had made one terrible mistake, but he had also made countless good choices. He had chosen to love me completely. He had chosen to create a life built on kindness and generosity. He had chosen to spend his final years trying to make amends for his past. Maybe it was time for me to make some good choices too. When I got home, there was a letter waiting for me from David's attorney. Inside was information about David's life insurance policy and his retirement accounts, the money that was legally and completely mine. After all the stolen money was returned to the victims, I still had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, not wealthy, but secure. I also had something more valuable than money. I had the truth about the man I had loved for 20 years. David Cooper had been a good husband. David Mills had made a terrible mistake. Michael Harrison had been a frightened young man who got in over his head, but they were all the same person. And that person had loved me with everything he had. 2 months later, I was working in my garden for the first time in 20 years. I had planted roses where the oak tree used to be, and tulips where we had found the storage unit key. The garden was beautiful now, full of color and life and hope. Lisa came by one afternoon while I was weeding. You look different, she said, watching me work in the dirt. Happy. I am happy. For the first time since David died, I feel like I can breathe again. No more secrets. No more secrets. Lisa sat on my porch steps. Do you miss him, the David you thought you knew? I thought about this while I planted a new rose bush. I missed David, but the David the first thought I knew and the David the first actually knew, they're the same person. He was always the man who loved me completely and would do anything to protect me. Learning about his past doesn't change that. Even though he lied to you for 20 years, he kept secrets to protect me. There's a difference. That evening, I sat in my newly beautiful garden and thought about the future. I was 55 years old. I had no children, but I had enough money to do whatever I wanted with the rest of my life. I thought about Robert and Linda Chen, and how they had found happiness despite everything that had happened to them. I thought about Frank Santos, who was serving probation but finally living without the guilt he had carried for 25 years. I even thought about Tommy Rishi, back in prison but maybe finally having to face the consequences of his choices. Everyone was getting a second chance, including me. I picked up my phone and called the local community college. They had a program for older adults who wanted to finish their education. I had always wanted to get a degree in social work, but I had dropped out of college when I married David. Maybe it was time to finish what I started. Hello, I said when someone answered. My name is Sarah Cooper, and I'd like to enroll in your social work program. As I signed up for classes, I thought about David's final letter. The one where he said I should focus on the good choices instead of the bad ones. This felt like a good choice. 6 months later, I was halfway through my first semester of college at age 55. My classmates were mostly young people, but a few were older adults like me who were starting over. I loved my classes, especially the ones about helping families in crisis. I thought I might want to work with people who were dealing with secrets and lies in their own families. I had experience with that now. One day after class, I got a call from Agent Rodriguez. Mrs. Cooper, I wanted to let you know that the restitution has been fully distributed. Robert and Linda Chen received their payment, as did the bank and the insurance company. The case is officially closed. What about Frank? Frank is doing well. He's been volunteering at a victims' rights organization. Says it helps him feel like he's making amends. And Tommy? Tommy will be in prison for a long time. He violated parole, and we found evidence that he was planning to commit more crimes. You don't have to worry about him anymore. After I hung up, I realized that this chapter of my life was finally over. The secrets had been revealed, the debts had been paid, and justice had been served. But more importantly, I had learned something about forgiveness. Robert and Linda Chen had forgiven David, even though he had never asked for their forgiveness. Frank had forgiven himself enough to try to make amends, and I had forgiven David for keeping secrets, even though I now understood he had done it out of love. Maybe it was time to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for not asking more questions, for not being the kind of wife David felt he could tell the truth to. That night, I worked in my garden until sunset. The roses were blooming beautifully, and the tulips would be coming up next spring. For 20 years, this yard had been off limits, a place of secrets and fear. Now it was a place of growth and beauty, and new beginnings. As I put away my gardening tools, I thought about what David would say if he could see me now, going back to school, making new friends, creating something beautiful where there used to be only secrets. I think he would be proud, and for the first time since I picked up that shovel 6 months ago, I was proud to. The garden was no longer forbidden, the secrets were no longer buried, and I was no longer afraid to dig deep and see what I might find. Sometimes, what looks like an ending is really just a new beginning, planted in the same soil where old secrets used to be hidden. My garden was proof of that. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do in my place? Write it in the comments. Your voice matters. And if this story moved you, give it a like, share it, and make sure to follow and subscribe for more. Asterisk.